This week on the Baseline Podcast, Josh and I discuss the results of the NFL draft. We discuss our winners and our losers. We discuss picks that we thought were interesting. We discuss the Browns draft. Did they have a good draft? Did they have a poor draft? And then we give you the little tidbits of everything that we thought throughout the whole 3-day process. All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast. I'm Ben, he's Josh, and we're back. We're back after a crazy draft week, after kind of a busy week for me. I was out on a retreat, so I got to catch the draft also over 6 hours different. So it was just weird. I caught the draft at weird times while I was on a retreat. But anyways, it was a great, crazy week. One thing we did learn from this week is that the Reds still suck. They are now literally the worst team by like 5 games. So I just thought I would let all Reds fans know that I'm there with you. I watched part of the highlights and realized there was about 20 fans, I think, at the last home game. So that's all we're going to talk about baseball because I'm too depressed to talk about the Reds. So anyways, Josh, we had a great week watching the draft, catching it up, realizing that some of our mock draft went well, some didn't. But Josh, give me your overall thoughts on the draft itself.
I think there were a lot more trades in the first round than I personally anticipated. There were a lot less quarterbacks drafted early in this one, which, I mean, kudos to the NFL GMs for not reaching for a quarterback. That's something that they usually don't do. There are also a ton of receivers drafted, a ton of Georgia Bulldogs drafted. I think they set a record. 15 Georgia players
Ohio
in the
State
round era. Yeah. Topped Ohio State and LSU teams that had 14 picks each, I think. So a couple guys fell that we didn't really expect to. A couple guys went really early, typical drafts. And then there were some other guys that you're just kind of scratching how they didn't even get drafted at all. But we'll dive into all that, I'm sure, Ben. What do you
absolutely
like to start with?
I think I'll start with, one, I think Cleveland hosted it better last year. I'm sorry. Sorry. Just thought I would throw that sorry. I'm just saying I think it was partly because we came out of COVID last year and it was just kind of a big thing. But no, overall, I think this year it was a weird draft. One, because I had to watch it in Europe. So last year I watched it in the States, obviously. So this year was just weird because it's like I'm waking up to oh, what happened? What did the Browns get? What are they? Whatever. There was some surprises, I'll be honest, and we'll talk about it. I mean, we had 3 punters taken, which I don't know if that's ever happened to see 3 punters drafted. And that was just sometimes I go in the GM's room and I'm like, so you have all these talented guys here and you choose a punter. I just always want to know. And we'll talk about the Browns because I know my brother right now is snickering as he's watching and listening to this. So, but we'll get to that in a short bit here. But yeah, I think overall, man, I think it was an interesting draft. Georgia seemed to have a lot of dudes, and I was like, okay, they're not going to break this record. And then at the end of the time, it's like I feel like the GMs came together and goes, you know what, we hate Ohio State as much as anybody else, so let's just draft these dudes. Let's just draft a few more guys.
The other wild thing about it, unlike that Ohio State and LSU team, which I feel was very balanced offensively and defensively, this was a very defense-heavy Georgia team, and they still managed to do that.
That's crazy.
That just says how highly everyone thinks of their defense.
Yeah, and it just shows.
They had a couple other guys on the offense, maybe guys that weren't utilized as much, but still seen as talented guys what was it, Zamir White and James Cook, running backs. George Pickens, who had some time with
their big tight end as well,
and also So
it was a loaded. Yeah, it was a loaded draft. I mean, in some senses, it was. Quarterback heavy that we thought, our GMs, like you said, are going to do this. They didn't, which we'll get into here in a second. But before we get into it, anyways, I'm wearing a Browns jersey because I felt, I know many Browns fans out there are a little bit scratching their head, and I was scratching my head outside of maybe one pick, and we'll talk about it here in a second. But overall, I just, if I'm going to grade the Browns draft, and we'll get into all the details of the Browns draft, because we're both Browns fans. If you are new to the podcast, Josh and I are extremely heavy on the old Ohio sports teams. I'm a Browns fan. He's a Browns fan. He's an Indians fan. Sorry, Guardians. Sorry, correction.
No offense taken.
No offense taken. I'm a Reds fan. So there's this, we obviously love the Browns. So we're going to be more critical on the Browns than we are at pretty much any other team. So if you're coming on here and like, wow, they really hate the Browns. No, we don't. We just think that there's things that they could have done differently. But Josh, if we're grading the Browns draft, how would you grade it? And your initial thoughts on the draft overall for the Browns?
See, this is like the tough thing because you're going to give like all your A's to the teams that had like multiple first round picks because they had like a lot more opportunity
of course.
to get guys. And it's tough to judge some of these mid-round players, but I'm going to give us like a C-, honestly.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why. Just because of the fact that I think we actually got better picks with like some of our later ones and our early ones.
We texted about that too. We were texting on Saturday.
The second round pick that we had, David Ajabo, Nakobe Dean, John Mechie, all right there on the board. All three of those guys fill a need on the team.
Mm-hmm.
We trade out of that pick. Ajabo goes right after us. That pick we traded ended up going to the Texans, which we've given them a ton of picks. Why not one more? And they used that to take Mechie. And then in the third round, we passed up Nakobe Dean 2 more times, as well as like every other NFL team. I don't know how he fell that far. And the Eagles ended up getting a major steal with Dean.
Which you predicted, which we both said, no, we said Lloyd, but we both kind of said that would be another guy that they might get.
Talking about Lloyd and Dean being the two best linebackers.
Yeah, and then
Lloyd would go first. I thought it would be.
It's ridiculous, but we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, and then finally third round comes around and we take Martin Emerson, corner out of Mississippi State, which I don't know who the heck that is, but I thought our secondary was
slow.
loaded.
I'll just say that much.
I thought it was loaded with guys like Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome and John Johnson, Troy Hill, who we ended up trading, I think, for a fifth round.
Back to the Rams.
Ronnie Harrison we re-signed, and Greedy Williams we're hoping can be back, and Grant Delpit. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, this is what the guy that we could have gotten in the second round, and this is the guy that we took in the third round. I hate that pick. Then we get Alex Wright, who no idea who that is. I'm going to be honest. I just know he's an edge from UAB. Kudos, I guess, for filling a need, but we could have gotten a much better edge at that second round pick once again. And then we get David Bell, wide receiver out of Purdue, who I told you during our combine talk that he was one of the biggest losers at the combine because I think a lot of people thought he was a first round talent, and then he jumped bad and ran slow and ended up slipping what ended up being in the third round. I thought he'd be maybe second or third round, but David Bell can play football. Like there's guys that can run and jump that can't play football.
But the question is, Josh, is he just another Jarvis Landry? That's the question.
I think
he just another Jarvis Landry.
Okay with me because I thought very highly of Jarvis Landry. This is a younger, much cheaper version of Jarvis Landry. So it feels it feels that need at wide receivers. So that guy to play that kind of a role.
Yeah, and I want to talk on these 3 picks because I'm kind of with you. When I looked the next morning, right? Like I looked on it would be Saturday morning. I pulled my phone. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Who's that? Okay. Who's that? It feels like, if you've ever played like a Madden game, right? And you get these generated rookies. That's what I felt like I was looking at. I'm like, I have no idea who you are. I look at his numbers. I'm like, he's not fast. This corner, he's like, why do we need another, like, just big, like, I get it. If we could, why didn't we go out and get the guy from UTSA who's 6'4", 205 and can run a 4.4? Like, why don't we go out and get that guy who's also still sitting there? So there's a lot of things with the first 3 picks that the Browns did, because I think that's like kind of our first round, right? Like these were our like first 3 picks. These are our first, basically. They were,
so you can't hold them to the same standard as like everyone's round 1.
Yeah, and so I think David Bell is the one I'm okay with, right? Like he's a receiver that has
David Bell. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, like he has a talent that he's easy first round. If he runs faster, he's a first round. He's gone in the first 25 picks, which, by the way, both of us in our mock drafts had him in that late first round, and then we said maybe early second round. So we both were kind of like we there's the chance he makes the first round, and obviously he ended up slipping, which I'm fine with the Browns taking him. The biggest one out of those 3 was, I agree with you when Ajabo was sitting there, when Dean was sitting there, and I looked back at the picks. I'm going, wait a minute, these guys were sitting there, and if you're Andrew Berry, I'm going, you have to give the Browns fans a really good reason why you think, unless you think Clowney's re-signing, unless you know something we don't know, and that could very well be where Clowney's re-signing, you know it, and it's just going to happen afterwards. Why not get an Ajabo? Yeah, he tore his Achilles. Okay. we had Delpit
that you can get in the second round,
and
though.
Delpit's the same way. Think about it. Delpit was a second round pick that was a first round talent, tore his Achilles, ends up coming back and having a good year. I think of Mechie. You asked for someone that could be a good slot guy, good out, could probably do both in and out if you need him to. Another guy, Schwartz, was a failure, at least in my eyes, right? Like he was just fast, like right, cool, awesome. You need to have someone with that. But my biggest thing with the defensive end, it's like I would take a Ajabo with a torn Achilles over a guy that I've not really heard of. I don't know a lot about. And again, that's our, being naive, I guess, in a sense of not knowing some of these guys, but also these guys were ranked 17 or 18 on the board. So we wouldn't know these guys necessarily.
We know that there were better available guys. We don't know exactly where these guys would place, I guess, on the talent spectrum. We just know that there were better available players.
Yeah, exactly. And so as a Browns, like if we're in the 4th and 5th round and you get these guys, like I'm like, okay, whatever, cool, sounds fine to me. But for me, they see these first 3 picks, and David Bell is probably the one that I was like, you know what, we got a guy that I think this might show that Jarvis isn't coming back. I think this is a clear sign that they couldn't reach an agreement with Jarvis, and Jarvis probably was wanting $8-9 million to come back, and I think. And Deshaun Watson could have even said, like, hey, let's get some younger talent, some younger dudes that can get in here and compete. And I think you even saw it more when they got a receiver here in the later rounds as well. I think it's just it sucks because we both love Jarvis in the sense of like what he's brought to the city of Cleveland. But again, I think Jarvis Landry is one of those guys that is one of those dudes that you could lose and you could fill in the draft with a younger, cheaper version of what he does. So those are the first 3 picks. Josh, what are your thoughts on? I think we both know our favorite pick for the Browns is probably that first one in the 4th round. Give me your thoughts on.
Again, I was going to initially wrap up my first thoughts with that 4th rounder that we got, Perrion Winfrey. Again, I think a guy that was a better pick than those first 2 that we got. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, it's really cool that we were able to get him in the 4th round, and it also fulfills a need on the defensive line. That's about as far as I was going to go. I mean, we can talk about drafting the kicker.
Hold on, Josh. We can't skip it. Josh, we can't skip. We know my brother is going to be like all over us for not talking about drafting a kicker.
We can also talk about how we drafted Jerome Ford, a running back from Cincinnati, when we already have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt.
and Johnson on the back end.
And Dearness Johnson. Yeah, didn't even mention that. Michael Woods, Isaiah Thomas, Dawson Deaton, just to wrap up the draft. But yeah, as a whole, I'm going to give us a C- just because we didn't have any 1st round picks, but we left some guys there in the 2nd and 3rd round that would have been great picks. We ended up drafting better with like our later picks, which
it's just weird.
We shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. And I mean, you know me, I'm very adamant on, pick what you know you need, but also be smart. And I think for me, the whole kicker thing, I think was they saw what Cincinnati did. I hate to say this, but they wanted to kind of like, oh, let's shore up our kicking game, which by the way, I will admit the Browns kicking game was terrible last year. Like it was literally statistically the worst.
It looked like McLaughlin was going to be the dude for a minute there.
Yeah. And so Cade York is a beast. I mean, the dude is, but do you want to spend a 4th round pick? And I mentioned the punters earlier. It's the same thing with kickers. Like, yeah, 5th. Like the idea for me is like, and I know my brother's gonna make fun of me, but I'm like, I did give him a hard time last year, like, because you don't draft a kicker. Like you saw what the Buccaneers did a few years ago when they drafted a kicker in the 2nd round. It was failed miserably with Aguayo, and I think that's the same thing. I'm going, if he doesn't pan out, Andrew Berry, this is another knife in your side, because this is something like, by the way, while he's sitting there, also another guy that we're going to talk about that was an undrafted free agent near the end of the show was Haskell Garrett, another defensive tackle you could just swipe up and have 2 really good defensive tackles on your roster.
I was wondering how many Browns fans, because there's also obviously a lot of Buckeye fans that are Browns fans, were like, why did we take Winfrey when Garrett was there? Because they kind of were viewed similarly, I think, both round defensive tackles.
Yeah, and I think also too, like you had, you could have got some more line help. I know they got a center in the 7th round, but you had you had Mumford from Ohio State. I'm a Ohio State fan, but Mumford went the round 7, which by the way, he shouldn't have. Mumford is at least a 3rd or 4th round pick. That's another guy that slipped. But The running back situation, I want to mention the running back one, Josh, because this one's the one that frustrated me the most, more than the kicker. And I can't believe I just said that. But to me, drafting a running back when you have two of the best running backs in the NFL, and then you have D'Ernest Johnson, who's going to be getting a multi-year deal sooner rather than later. And you have Felton, by the way, who's also on the roster. What does that mean? Does that mean D'Ernest Johnson's getting traded? Does that mean Hunt's getting Barry, be careful what you're doing here. That's all I got to say to him. Like, don't be doing something that's going to.
We paid him, but I think the league is also kind of views running backs as expendable. So if there's any kind of a chance that we're going to have to pay, D'Ernest Johnson a little bit more than what a third string running back should be paying, or even Kareem Hunt for being a backup, like they might just ship them out because of how, I guess, replaceable the NFL views running backs.
Yeah. And so, and first off, props to Cincinnati. They had five picks. Was it? No, some crazy number about picks they had, which was really cool. But I will say this. I think that the Browns, I would give the Browns I would say a C. I'm not going to go C-. I'm going to go C, just average, because I do feel like the late pick of the defensive tackle of him from, Oklahoma, which, by the way, they went Oklahoma heavy, which I think is just really funny, which is, wait, hold on.
Oklahoma has an awful defense. They're known for having awful defense. And we took two defenders and a receiver, correct?
Yes. Which is just funny to me because they're getting rid of Baker, and he just had a statue erected in Oklahoma.
Game, yeah.
And I think it's just so funny. It's almost like an extra knife to Mayfield's back. Like, just so you know, we still love Oklahoma players. We just don't like you. But again, I wish they would have done something with Baker during the draft, like got maybe next year's picks or like a couple, I don't know. Yeah. Now this makes me think, wow, we're going to have to eat this 18 million. We're going to have to probably eat most of this 18 million.
You got to get rid of him. Like, you can't have him in the locker room. That's just going to be awkward, a distraction. It's going to create controversy.
And that's what teams want. Teams want this to where they're going to have to cut him in or whatever. But I will say, I think the Browns overall could have done a lot worse and could have done a lot better. I said this before we started recording. I think either way, I don't view this as an amazing draft, but it also wasn't terrible. There was some other teams that did, I think, a lot worse. There was teams that made some weird picks, like a guy from Chattanooga going in the first round. I'm not saying, I know it's Bill Belichick. I'm just saying. But so Josh, do you think that the Browns have gotten better after this draft, or do you think they're just kind of the same? They've added small pieces.
It's tough to say because, I mean, are these guys going to start this season? Like,
maybe the defense tackle
going to be a starting receiver opposite Donovan Peoples-Jones? Is Perion Winfrey going to start a defensive tackle? Because I don't really like the prospects of having to do that, especially since I think some of the other teams in the division had much better drafts. Like, I don't think the Browns, like in the AFC North, I don't think they had the first or second best drafts.
No, I don't.
With as loud of an offseason as we've had with going out and getting guys like Amari Cooper and then the big explosion with Watson, like we didn't really do a whole lot in the draft to, I guess, put the cherry on top, if you will, for the offseason.
Yeah, like I'm not saying I wanted them to, because I've been telling people I didn't want them to go back in the first round if it was just going to
I'm not mad that we didn't do that. It would have had been very circumstantial.
Yeah, like if they would have gave up, maybe if they gave up Baker and they went in the first round, then I'm okay with it. But I'm glad they stayed where they are. But the whole trading out of the second round was just stupid in my mind. I'm sorry, like that was just dumb. Like, you have a lot of talent that's still sitting there, and yeah. So that's where we see the Browns draft. Josh and I both kind of like, we obviously wish that the Browns had a better draft, but that's besides the point.
You want to talk about a team, Ben, that killed the draft?
Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do some winners, losers.
All right. My number one winner, perhaps you agree with me, the New York Jets.
Oh, 100%. It's not even close.
I mean, there was a lot of opportunity with the amount of first round picks that they had, but I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit for saying that Derek Stingley would go before Sauce Gardner, but you did get the fourth pick, Sauce Gardner, to the Jets. 100% spot on.
My man, Sauce. That's all I want to say.
For that. I think if Stingley was there, they might have taken him, but I don't know for sure. So yes, a lot of people think Sauce was the number one corner. So we'll go ahead and say they got the number one corner. In our opinion, they also got the number one receiver, Garrett Wilson, at pick number 10.
Which is, okay, first off, pause you right there. Falcons, what are you doing? That's all I'm going to say. Keep going.
We'll probably touch on that later too. But and then they wrap up the first round, trading up again to get Jermaine Johnson, an edge
Great pick.
State that we both like. That slipped. So fantastic for them. Then in the second round, they're still doing work. They get Breece Hall, best running back, maybe him or Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, it's close.
They get in the second round to pair up with Michael Carter now. And then the third round, they get your guy and kind of my guy, tight end Jeremy Ruckert. Ohio State.
Sleeper.
They could have been, you could argue, they had the best corner, best receiver, best running back, best tight end, and definitely a top 5 edge. Like, kudos to the Jets. Usually, like, they're a laughing stock, but they absolutely crushed it.
They are also my number one winner. And I think it just, when they got Sauce, that was sealed it for me. They didn't have to get anybody else good. Okay. They got Sauce. And when you get the sauce, you get the beans. All right. That is a terrible dad joke, and I'm sorry, Dad. But no.
I was going to say, is Garrett Wilson the beans or what?
It was a close one. I will say though, I liked what Zach Wilson said. It's a Wilson to Wilson combo, and I like that now. I kind of think that's kind of cool. Wilson times 2. I will say this: I think the Jets did a really good job, but it is the Jets, and so I have to hold it with a grain of salt. Will they keep this? Like, will they use this well, or will they ruin it? I don't know, but I will say, if you get a chance, Josh or anybody listening, go and watch ESPN's video or Ohio State's video of Jeremy Ruckert getting drafted, and watch his dad. It is the greatest. Yeah. It is the greatest like video I have seen of a draft. Like, so Jeremy Ruckert grew up in New Jersey. He was a huge New York Jet fan growing up. So getting drafted there, but his dad is like, just like, yeah. And then there's this moment when he puts the hat on and he goes, Jets, Jets.
Oh, he was so excited.
And I'm just saying, those are the moments. And I want people to realize, like, yeah, he got drafted in the 3rd round, and people are like, why is he so excited? Like, these dudes have worked their whole life to get to this moment, to go, I just didn't get past high school. I got past college. Now I'm going to the NFL. And that was really cool for me. So Garrett Wilson, you were right. I got to give you kudos to that. You've been calling that since the beginning. You said Garrett Wilson to the Jets. That has been your number one uno pick. That was like always going to be correct.
It's just, I thought it was going to be him being the first receiver taken though too.
That is true too. Yeah.
But I guess we can touch on that too. Like Drake London.
Oh, just stop.
A little bit of buzz going to Atlanta. I also know the rapper Drake placed a $100,000 bet that cashed in, I believe, at $250,000 for saying Drake to the Falcons. Like, we aren't very high on Drake London on this show, Ben, mostly because we just see him as the big body, which is why the NFL views him very highly. But he's a deep threat that can't create separation, that can only catch the
injury
prone. Yeah. So I would have thought the fact that he was dodging running the 40 would have set off the alarm to the NFL that he can't run, because he said he avoided the 40 because of his ankle injury. Meanwhile, at his pro day, he's doing all these cutting drills and other things that his ankle definitely couldn't handle if he was still having some struggles with that. You tell me he can't run? Like, this dude, big mistake by the Falcons. I don't even think they needed to take a receiver personally. I think it was more of an overreaction.
Well, if you
suspended the whole season, and if you're going to take a receiver, what are you doing if Wilson's still there?
Wilson, Olave, Jamison Williams. You want an injured receiver? Get Jamison Williams, who we know runs a 4.3, 4.4.
Exactly. Yeah,
with a bum knee. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to me. That was interesting. But my number 2 winner, and we'll see what you think about this. Okay. My number 2 winner is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I hate this as a Browns fan. I absolutely hate this saying this right now. But for me, to get Kyle Hamilton, who we both have said is a top 5 talent, yes, but because he's a safety, we all knew he was going to slip. We both said, he's going to slip. It's going to happen, whatever. They got him at 14, which I had projected them getting a defensive lineman or some type of we both kind of were saying that that's where they would go, or a corner or something like that. Not only do they get that, they come back at 25 and they get they get the guy who we were. Okay, this is just funny to me, right? The Jets end up trading with the Titans, who the Titans we thought, like, since the beginning we did our mock drafts, we said Tyler Linderbaum, that's where he was going. And I think part of the reason why Titans traded out was like, okay, he's not there. You know, I mean, they moved up to get Burks, but then they were hoping maybe he was there. I don't know. But all I do know is that getting Tyler Linderbaum, I think it helps the Ravens because I know their offensive line was banged up. It gives them a body that I think is probably going to be an all-pro before they're all said and done. So that was a good pick. And then I'm trying to see their other pick here that I saw that I really liked. I got to remember it. Oh, David Ajabo. David Ajabo, who's sitting there at 45, which I think is just blasphemy. I mean, I know I'm a Ohio State fan, but the dude's talent is just raw talent is unreal. I know he's tore his Achilles, but again, I think just because he's tore his Achilles, it doesn't mean he's not going to come back at least somewhat what he was.
Anytime you can get like a first round talent in the second round, I say go for it.
Yeah. So for me, that's number 2 for me is definitely the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah. I actually kind of have a tie for my second, and the Ravens is part of it, but I also really like what the Eagles were able to do.
Yeah, that was my
Davis to start. They traded up to get that man. They traded a couple other picks to get that, ended up being for a trade for AJ Brown. So I know that's not a draft pick, but it's still hauling in a Pro Bowl type of player with some picks on draft night. So it's part of it. And then they stole Nakobe Dean round 3, Ben. I think that man is a first-round talent as well. The NFL has said that he's too small, and so they let him slip to the 3rd round. But size was never a problem for this man in the SEC, going against NFL talent his whole college career, and now all of a sudden it is an issue. And he's also got all the intangibles. He's got the intelligence. He can read an offense. He can call plays. Like, what a steal there at round 3. So I love Baltimore for all the reasons you just said, but I also love Philly being able to pull some of those moves as well, getting that big steal in the 3rd round, getting a big man like Jordan Davis first and turning a couple other picks into a Pro Bowl wide receiver instead of maybe risking on one of these other guys that wasn't, Olave, Williams, or Wilson.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely interesting to me because the Eagles are number 3 for me. So okay. I was there with you. I think the reason why they're a little bit lower, I think, is just I really liked for me, the whole Kyle Hamilton thing kind of put me over for the Ravens and Ajabo. Yeah. That combination was just like, okay, they got 2 steals.
The value, yes.
The value in those 2. I think for me, the Eagles, which we both had them taking a linebacker, for them to get a linebacker in the 3rd round, which had top 15 quality, that also put them up there for me. Jordan Davis is just freak. That's all I gotta say. Like, I'm
surprised that they make suits big enough for that man to fit in.
It's ridiculous.
On draft night? These guys are all dressing good.
They're dressing good, and whoever makes that guy gets paid a lot of money. But yeah, so I really like the Eagles draft. I think they did a really amazing job, just doing what they got to do. I think. You look at the 1st round, I really, obviously we'll talk about the quarterbacks here in a second, but, I'm going to go individual winner would be for me in that 1st round. I have one that's kind of funny and then the second one that's actually real. So the first one that's kind of funny as well. Cole Strange. I mean, who would have thought sitting there and you're from UT Chattanooga and you get picked by the New England Patriots? I just think it's fascinating. Like,
and then they had did you see the viral video now of Sean McVay laughing? Yes. Because apparently, and everyone took it as he was disrespecting Strange and the Patriots. Obviously, McVay's explanation was he was laughing with the Rams GM about all the time they wasted evaluating this guy that they thought they could get with the 104th pick, only for him to go in the 1st round. So
yeah.
That's kind of how the Rams viewed him, as he was going to be like right there in the 4th round, and New England maybe had a huge reach here in the 1st round, but everyone's going to go ahead and say it was okay because it was Bill Belichick and he's a genius, as if he's never failed on a 1st round pick in his life. N'Keal Harry, but
we're just saying. My other big win when it comes to individuals, I would just say, like, seriously, a win would be Chris Olave going to the Saints. I think it's a great fit. It just makes sense, one, because he's a high state going to the Saints. It's just kind of like a normal thing that we're now saying. But I think it made a perfect sense. You were kind of right about the fact that he was going in that position, just the wrong team. So you were on it. So yeah, that one. And also, I guess I would, a tie with that would be my other one, which was in the first round, which I think is a great fit. In the long run, I think more. No, you're not in the short run, which was Kenny Pickett. I think it's just going to be a Pittsburgh guy with a Pittsburgh. I think it just makes it a great pick. Which I was right for like the last 2 mock drafts. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what are your thoughts there? Yeah.
I think that's a good segue into talking about the quarterbacks. And why don't we just start with Pickett?
Yeah, let's do it.
Like, they made the trade in the offseason for Mitch Trubisky. They had Mason Rudolph, who is basically a certified bust, career backup quarterback from here. And then Haskins before, the whole tragedy there. So it was like Pittsburgh, they really needed a quarterback. That was the one glaring weakness on the offense for this team. And they went ahead and got who they thought was the best
their guy.
We thought that Malik Willis was going to be gone. We thought there was a chance that maybe Matt Corral could be picked in the first round. You really were high on Desmond Ritter possibly being a first-round pick, and Pittsburgh was able to get their guy, hometown hero, if you will, Kenny Pickett. Like, I like it. I don't know if Kenny's going to be that franchise quarterback. None of us are really high in the QB class as a whole, but Kenny Pickett, we both thought he was like second best QB. So, for first round, you could say maybe a reach, but this was Pittsburgh's main need. Could they have traded out of the first round and maybe still get him and then maybe accumulate a couple picks? Maybe that was a possibility, given the fact that no one took a quarterback in the second round either. But I like the pick overall, like the fit, staying right there in Pittsburgh, addressing the need. That's the first quarterback taken off the board, Ben. You have anything else to add about Pickett, or do you want to move on to some of these other guys?
I think Pickett's just one of those guys that I've always said. I said this last week. I said this weeks before. Pickett's the most NFL-ready quarterback in this draft class. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be an all-pro. I'm just saying if you handed him the ball tomorrow, I feel like he could manage somewhat a game in the NFL. And plus, you're the Steelers, and you're looking at the Browns, Bengals, and Ravens going, we got to catch up, because if the Browns have Deshaun Watson and they're loaded the way they are, the Bengals are going to be back where they are at, and the Ravens have loaded up in the draft. You're sitting there like, yeah, we need a quarterback. So that's my thought. And I'm more bummed I'm not bummed the fact that I proved the whole Desmond Ritter thing, but I'm more bummed in the whole Malik Willis. I think we both are kind of shocked. That's the one I think is the most shocking to me out of all of them, from at least my perspective.
Yeah, not only the fact that he wasn't taken in the first round, but not the second round either. And then the third round to a team that maybe on the outside doesn't look like they need a quarterback, but maybe the Titans are looking at that 3-pick game from Ryan Tannehill. They're looking at how much money they're giving him for what he does, and they're seeing themselves as a run-first team with Derrick Henry, and they're like, we still have Tannehill a couple more years on this contract. That means that we can ride this out, get Malik, who maybe wasn't ready to start right away to begin with, a couple years to develop in this system. And then maybe by the time year 3 rolls around, he's ready to go. And they kind of viewed him as maybe somewhat of a value pick, because while he may not be a first-round talent, he was supposed to go in the first round because a lot of people thought he was the best quarterback. And, to Tennessee. And not even the second QB taken off the board, Ben. We can talk about Desmond Ritter next, unless you have anything else to add to Malik.
I just feel bad for Malik, because I feel like he also felt the hype of like, oh, I have a really good shot of going top 10. And I think
he got invited to the draft.
That's what I'm saying.
Invited a couple quarterbacks and only a handful of players.
It's got to be awkward for him. Like, you've worked your butt off and you're at a smaller school, but you're a guy that I think. And I'm so high on Malik, and that, like, we both are high, but I'm super, I really love the way Malik plays. I think the one thing that Malik had going against him was his last year wasn't the greatest. And will he be able to play against former SEC guys, former dudes that are just bullying and maulers? Like, that's where I think we'll have to see. Will Malik get that chance? I think you'll see him in some scrappy games at the end of the year this year. I think just like when there's blowouts and stuff. But I could see them doing some packages where they bring him in as like a wildcat quarterback and say, hey, let's do some damage. But yeah, let's talk about my man Desmond Ritter, which everyone laughed at me, thought I was crazy that he was like the third best quarterback. At one point, I had him going the second quarterback to the Steelers. He ends up going to the Falcons, which I feel like they made a better pick here than they did in the first round, but that's just me. I think he's a guy that they can develop and make it. He's a Marcus Mariota, just not as I really
talented. Like that. The fact that let's just say Marcus Mariota ends up getting an injury. They have a guy that's going to be a backup quarterback now with Desmond Ritter, who has a similar skill set and is basically, a little mini me of Marcus Mariota. So I kind of got a kick out of that. And we know that Marcus also is only on a short-term contract. They don't see him as the long-term solution over there, but they see him as a veteran who has starting experience. And maybe a similar situation to how the Titans viewed Malik Willis is Desmond Ritter is a guy that could be ready to go by the time year 3 rolls around for him.
Yeah, I think Desmond Ritter is got a lot of upside. And again, hats off to Cincinnati, by the way. Luke Farrell. Wow, Luke Farrell. That's a former Ohio State guy. I'm wrong, Ohio State guy. Luke Fickell. There we go. But hats off to Luke Fickell, who's done an amazing job. He's turned down job offers and said, Cincinnati is where I want to be. Cincinnati's turned into a powerhouse. And
how many guys can we name off the top of our head? Like Desmond Ritter got drafted. We took their running back whose name I already forgot. They had Alex Pierce get drafted. Yep. Both corners, Kobe Bryant and Sauce Gardner.
One more. I know they had one more, and I can't remember his name. There was one more guy that I can't remember who it was. But yeah, I think they had like 5 or 6, I think, something like that, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, I think that was crazy. And I guess we can touch on, I think Matt Corral is
also a third rounder there to Carolina, which people thought Carolina might take a quarterback. So nice that they didn't have to waste their 6th overall pick on one. They still can get one of these guys that's still highly viewed like Matt Corral.
Yep, Matt Corral. And then we had some other guys that were picked later in the rounds.
Sam Howell to round 5,
which I believe is actually a great fit for him at the Commanders. I think, which I can still not get used to saying. I think it's a good fit. I think it's a place where I think, I wouldn't be shocked if he starts after week like 7. Would not be shocked. But again, I think
you see sometime on the field at least one week with how injured Carson Wentz tends to get.
And it's crazy to think
count on Carson to play all 17.
It's crazy to think Sam Howell at one point was considered a couple years ago as the number 1 prospect going in this draft.
That's absolutely, isn't it crazy thing about before this season started, the first couple picks were going to be Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell. Mm-hmm. Spencer Rattler is not even a starting quarterback at Oklahoma anymore. He's still in school. Sam Howell is a 5th round pick.
It shows you that 1, what will change, and 2, the talent doesn't always matter. It's your work ethic. It's how you put it together in the long term. So yeah, that was the quarterbacks. I think, we won't do winners and losers on the quarterbacks just because I feel like we could do that with every position. We'd be here until
I'm just going to go ahead and collectively say NFL GMs winners for not reaching for a quarterback, because one quarterback in the first 2 rounds is something I really don't think I've ever seen before.
It was kind of refreshing to see GMs not get overwhelmed. And I think a lot of GMs are looking at next year going, ooh, CJ Stroud.
They see it, yeah.
Bryce Young. Let's just survive. Let's survive, and then next year, I think the Seahawks are in that position where they're like, let's just survive. If we're bad, we're bad, and let's go out and get a quarterback next year. And
Detroit could even be that way too. Like right now, they have a receiving room that has St. Brown, Jamison Williams now, Quintez Cephas, all these guys that are 1 or 2 years in the league tops.
Yeah, and I think again, It was a really interesting draft again overall. I think we go back to what we said at the beginning. A weird, interesting draft, I think. Not as explosive draft as we're used to. I mean, and with I think a lot of drafts are usually really hyped. I feel like this draft wasn't as hyped for some. For some, it might be. But one thing I will say before we get into our losers, one interesting note, a guy that I'd mentioned a lot of times. I know of him. My man Bernard Raymond, who was an offensive tackle from Central Michigan, originally from Austria, who I had knew through a couple mutual friends. I had met like once, or like he came to a game, a basketball game or whatever, at Cedarville. Former tight end turned tackle, who everyone was saying he could be at the bottom of that first round. I had him projected like early second, bottom first. He drops all the way to the Colts, which I think was a steal. We'll get into our steals at the end. We'll get into our steals here at the end of the show. But I just wanted to throw that out there because that was like the one guy I'm like, I'm so happy he got to go to a place that I think is going to be a perfect fit for him. So yeah, I think that was very interesting. But Josh, my question for you is, what are some teams that you think, they really should hit the rewind button and maybe try to start over again?
Can we start with Green Bay?
I was going to start there too.
Let's start with Green Bay because by the time that 22nd pick rolled around, basically all the receivers that should have been taken the first round were gone. And I don't know if that maybe caught Green Bay off guard because, I mean, they went so fast. Like London went 8, and then it was Wilson, Olave, Jamison, and then it was Dotson. And then it was,
which that shocked me. Dotson going at 16 shocked everyone, I think.
And then Burks at 18 to Tennessee. And then all of a sudden it was like all the receivers that should be taken in the first round are gone. And you could see by the way that everyone was drafting after that, like the NFL saw a significant gap between those guys. And then the next tier of guys like Christian Watson and George Pickens and John Mechie and those kind of guys. So Green Bay did still get Christian Watson in the second round, but I don't know if they just were kind of caught sleeping or because if they saw this all happening, I think they should have at least tried, and maybe they did and failed, to pair those 2 first rounders to move up to get a last, second pick.
Go and get like Jamison Williams. Yeah.
Or even go up just a couple picks to make sure you secure Treylon Burks. But
they were probably my number one loser. One, because I think it's just become a meme. Like every year, the GM's like,
here's a meme for you, Ben, actually. The Packers have only drafted one offensive player in the first round since 2012. That one player was Aaron Rodgers' backup quarterback.
Wow.
And I want to say since 2010, they have never taken a wide receiver, running back, or tight end in the first round.
And I'll say this about the whole Packer thing. I don't mind you draft 2 defensive players if you think you do. You're not going to get a wide receiver you want. But Quay Walker, no offense, nothing against you, man. Nothing against you. You have Dean and Devin Lloyd sitting there. I'm just saying. I know that might fit their style. I don't care. You have Nakobe Dean sitting there, a freakish talent. You have Devin Lloyd, a freakish talent, sitting there. And you go, Quay Walker. That makes sense. And in my head, I go, you better feed this to the fans well. The fans better get this. You better explain this really well because I know some Packers fans who are not necessarily the happiest with not even getting like, okay, trade those first round picks and go move back to the second round and get a bunch of picks in the second and third round. You didn't. And it's just interesting to me. Devontae Wyatt, I kind of like because he's a versatile guy. I'm kind of high on him here lately. So he's a versatile guy, but still, I don't quite get it. But that is the Packers. For me, number 2, one of my other, I hate to say losers because I feel like I'm going to get written wrong on this, would be the Patriots, mainly with that first pick in Cold Strange. I hate saying this because it's Bill Belichick, and I'm sitting here going, I'm going to regret all of this in about 6 months. But Cole Strange, I feel like there must be something there. I don't know about you, Josh, but he must be this special freak talent that obviously people are shocked as we are. And why not get someone else there? I'm trying to see who else was there. So you had, let's see, Carl Flaftis was there, Daxton Hill, Lewis Seen, Christian Watson, if you want to go with receiver to help out.
Carl Aftis would have been, I think, the guy I would have taken because in my mock, I had them taking an edge, I believe. That was clearly lacking.
Well, they even had, you had other guys too sitting there. And there's some other receivers sitting there. George Pickens was sitting there. Alec Pierce was sitting there. Trey McBride, a tight end. There's so many other options. Where are you going with this? They end up getting in the second round, Tyquan Thornton, but also Alec Pierce was sitting there. Sky Moore was sitting there. I'm just trying to figure out where they were at with that. If you get what I'm saying, like that was like I was just confused in the first 2 picks.
I think everyone's going to say it was the right thing to do because Bill Belichick said so. And
I know that's
they've hit on first round picks before. Don't get me wrong, guys like Gerard Mayo and Dante Hightower and Chandler Jones were all former New England first round picks.
That was a while
back. But when you look at more recent, like what the heck is that D2 guy doing for them? They took a couple years ago.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I can't remember.
Or Sony Michel, who I don't even think is on the roster.
No,
anymore.
He's not. No,
like, that's a first round running back that like in 3 years is gone. Like the Patriots.
N'Keal Harry is also
N'Keal Harry, another one that I threw out. Yeah. So I don't always understand what New England's doing. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I don't think you can just say, well, Belichick said so that means it was a good pick.
But you're getting to a point now where there's no more Tom Brady. Like it's like you better make the right move.
And that's the other thing too, is like everyone wants to glorify like the mid-round, late round diamonds in the rough and say like this is like the teams that win Super Bowls are the guys that, build.
No.
It's like no. Your Pro Bowlers and your Hall of Famers are, for the most part, first round picks. Like the Bengals, first round pick Joe Burrow, first round pick Jamar Chase. The Rams, former number 1 overall pick Matthew Stafford. I hate to give this man so much credit, but Odell Beckham, former first-round pick. Van Jefferson, another wide receiver, second-round pick. And Aaron Donald, I believe, a first-round pick. And Von Miller, a first-round pick. Like, teams that win Super Bowls, guys that make Pro Bowls that are all pros are in large part first-round picks. Like, it goes back to even high school. Like, most of the guys that are dominating the college ranks are 5-star recruits. Like, these things matter.
Yeah.
And you can't just discount those and say, you know what? This guy could do something because one time Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick and it turned out to be the greatest quarterback of all time.
Yeah, it is shocking to me. But again, I think that's just it's just Bill Belichick. But that's my number 2 loser. What about you? Who kind of falls in that second slot for you as having a losing draft?
Yeah, it's kind of tough to say. Like there were some teams that like the Dolphins started off with a lot and they ended up not doing so hot. I know a lot of people hated their first round pick. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head.
Dun, dun, dun. I have it up here. Dolphins. No, they didn't have a first round pick. Did they trade it? They were supposed to be they were traded out because they were supposed to be at 29. That's where Cole Strange went.
Okay. Yeah, they initially did. So it was a draft pick trade then. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they never moved up or anything. Yeah, they traded out of that.
Yeah, people have. I've been trying to avoid like all the draft grades and stuff, but people really didn't like what Miami did.
Yeah, Miami was it. That was my third one. That was the one.
I'm gonna go ahead and say this too as a loser is Washington because they traded out of getting Chris Olave or Jamison Williams to reach on Jahan Dotson.
Which I have heard they've loved.
While Treylon Burks is still there, by the way.
Supposedly, though, I did read that they have loved Jahan Dotson from the beginning. Which
so instead of taking Jahan 11th, they thought 16th was.
It's all the minute details. It's the minute details, Josh.
Well,
that's what it is.
If they wanted Dotson all along, then perhaps I will give them partial credit for not taking him 11th and at least getting a couple more picks to trade back and still get him because nobody else was going to do that.
That is true. It is interesting to me. Like, yeah, I would say the Dolphins are up there for me. I will say, I didn't say this when we said the winners, the Jacksonville Jaguars, honestly, I'm in a weird spot with them. I don't consider them winners. I don't consider them losers, but Trayvon Walker, I don't know.
Did you know that Trayvon Walker is the first number 1 overall pick to not be?
Yes, I know. I saw that.
We're All-American.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, though. You have Aiden Hutchinson. You have some of these other freaks sitting there. And again, I know Trayvon Walker has come out of nowhere, but I'm sitting there going, all right. I mean, now you can't blame it on Urban anymore. That's all I'm going to say. You can't blame it on Urban anymore. This is on you guys now. And then they go, I will say this, though. I'll give them props. They go back in the first round and they get Devin Lloyd, who I think will be a great fit in that defense get Devin Lloyd. I think that was a very good pick. Obviously Tampa Bay ended up getting that first, second round pick. But yeah, it's definitely interesting for me. This whole draft, these winners and losers. Again, this is just our thoughts on it. We'd love to hear your thoughts below. I really want to hear you guys' thoughts because we'll probably mention this for months to come. We'll be like, yeah, that was not a very good pick now that we think about it. But I want to get into, Josh, kind of we're talking about winners and losers. I want to get into you some, I would say this, maybe some winners of like individual players / sleepers, or some players that you think, or players that you think that should have got drafted that have kind of slipped out or maybe didn't get drafted as high as you thought? Give me one player and I'll give you one player. We'll kind of go like that.
Yeah. Calvin Austin was a guy that I was interested in to see where he was going to go, because I think he basically stole the show at the combine, at least in terms of the receivers. Nobody really had an idea of what kind of stuff he could do. And I mean, he ranked not only high in his class, but for out of all the guys, like very well. And I want to say it was 4th or 5th round to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh picked him up. They picked up George Pickens. So that wide receiver room, those guys are going to team up with Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool now. And I'm kind of nervous about having to guard such a fast, athletic track guy like Calvin Austin out there, because I think he's also got some football skill to him. He's not just the guy that can run and jump. I think he can actually play football too.
Yeah, I would say one of my, sleeper, guy that I'm going to call him a sleeper that I think could do some damage in the NFL, that I've been high on, and I'm going to go back to him. And that's my man, Jeremy Ruckert. I think Jeremy Ruckert in the 3rd round is an absolute steal. And I'll say this, I'll preface it with this. People are like, why is it a steal? Because Jeremy Ruckert was never the full attention in the Ohio State offense. If this man was the full attention, we saw what he did against Clemson, some of these ridiculous catches, some of these, this guy played amazing at the times that you were able to see him. And I think Jeremy Ruckert, he can block. He's shown he can block in the college. He can pass catch. He can do what is asked of him. Plus, he's a hometown kid going to New York. It's, to me, Jeremy Ruckert is probably, for me, the biggest steal / sleeper pick of the draft. And I just think it's just that combination of, not only did you get Garrett Wilson, but now you give Zach Wilson another target on the inside. I'm just saying, I think that is a great pick.
Yeah, I think people outside of Ohio might be scratching their head at that, just because they're going to look at the numbers and say, well, he only had, 15 catches?
Yeah, he only had 25 catches this year, I think.
Yeah, but
he also had Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, and Olave in that same offense.
Yeah, traditionally, Ohio State doesn't really use tight ends. And then with the receiver room that they had, why wouldn't you utilize those guys?
Of course.
So Ruckert just kind of was an afterthought. But when he was utilized, he made plays. So I think that could be a pick that's going to surprise a lot of people that they might be confused by, but pretty quickly are going to realize, this dude can ball.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll go back in before I throw it back over to you. I'll go back into the 3rd round. The 3rd round for me was full of sleeper picks for me. Another one was, I mentioned him earlier, who I said I would mention a little bit later, coincidentally, was Bernard Raymond. I think as an offensive tackle, a raw talent, a dude who's 6'7", 300 pounds, a former tight end. So he has good footwork. He has good agility. The Colts got a steal in the round 3. I don't care what anybody says. But getting Bernard Raymond, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I'm going with the flow here. I'm not Austrian, so I don't know. But that's who I think Josh got a tremendous steal there. Again, I almost wish the Browns would have picked him up. I'm just saying. But yeah, that's who I think Bernard Raymond is, my second sleeper / steal of the draft.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a couple more here. Maybe you'll agree or disagree, but they're Ohio boys. The Seahawks got Kobe Bryant in the 4th round.
That was a good one. That's a good one.
They also got Tyreke Smith in the 5th round.
That's another. Tyreke Smith is a...
they did. Seattle had a sneaky, I don't think it was a good enough draft to be considered a winner, but it was sneaky.
It was sneaky.
Charles Cross first, then Boy Mafe and edge in the 2nd round. They get Kenneth Walker in the 2nd round at running back, and then Kobe Bryant falling all the way to round 4 and Tyreke Smith to round 5. Those are 2 other ones that I'm surprised they were on the board that long.
And I think why Tyreke Smith was there specifically is because he never had a huge season at Ohio State. He never had a 10 sack season. He always had 2 or 3 sacks, but the dude's a freak athlete. You watch him, he's 6'3", but he's a freak. And the way he moves, it's what Seahawks like, that guy that can move, can get out on the edge. I think the Seahawks had that was another team I was fighting to give a winner, but I'm like, okay, they didn't have a great draft, but they had a really good.
A lot of picks are like, okay, these are good picks, but maybe not necessarily great picks or like the value picks. Or
I will say another sleeper is one guy that, remember, I mentioned to you, I think a few mock drafts ago, was the guy out of he's from out of Minnesota. I got to find it here. Where'd he go? Falale, or I can't pronounce that right. I think I can pronounce that right. Falale. He is 6'8", 400 pounds, and he's going to the Ravens, I believe, is where he got drafted.
He by chance Jordan Davis's stepbrother or half brother.
I don't know.
Jordan Davis DNA in him.
He got drafted 110 overall. He was projected to go second round. Daniel Falale, offensive tackle, Minnesota, 6'8", 400. I'm sorry.
I remember him actually getting talked about during the college football season.
He's just ridiculous.
In my head right now.
Yeah, so that was I think a good steal by the Ravens. Just, by the way, as a Browns fan, again, I'm going to go back to the Browns because we're both Browns fans. I'm honestly a little nervous that the Browns could be like, let's say 8-8 this year, 9-8, and they could not even make the wild card. Like, that's how good the AFC North could be this year. There could be 3 teams with 10 wins easily. So those are my things. I wanted to talk about, obviously, I will say one Ohio State pick that I think we haven't mentioned was Nicholas Petit-Frere going to Titans. I think was a really good pick. They don't really have they have one tackle set in, but that was a good pick just because I think the whole Vrabel Ohio State connection, I think he kind of seen, Ohio State guy sitting there, we'll take him. I again, there was a lot of teams with some great picks. Would you say, Josh, there was one undrafted free agent that you think should have been drafted?
Justin Ross. I mean, this was a guy that people said late first round, early second round. Since his freshman year, being in the same room as T. Higgins, Hunter Renfrow, and Amari Rodgers, everyone was like, this guy's going to be a future top 10 pick. And he has the injury, right? So it's like, okay, well, he's not going to be a top 10 pick now, obviously, but he's still going to, get drafted in one of the first, maybe not the first, but second or third round. And the man went all the way undrafted. And at least to this time we're recording, Ben, this is like almost 24 hours after the draft is done. He's still unsigned.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these other guys, like Haskell Garrett that we talked about, went undrafted. He got picked up by, I believe, Tennessee, but Ross is still out there. And what the heck is going on?
Can the Browns pick him up? Can the Browns just? Can we just pick him up? Or even like
Baltimore Ravens. Like, I don't want the Ravens to pick him up. I'm just saying they have Rashad Bateman and then a lot of other nobodies at receiver after trading Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, I'm surprised that Justin Ross is still unsigned. Like, not only the fact that he went undrafted, but is still unsigned right now.
I would say, I was going to say Haskell Garrett because I just feel like, but that's like the obvious one. I think everyone's saying Haskell Garrett because the dude, we both agree, should have been like a 4th round pick at least. So that one was weird. But for me, it's Master Teague from Ohio State. I know I went to Ohio State, but he's a running back who 2 years ago had 1,000 yards rushing, or almost 1,000 yards rushing. He's like a big burly back. If you ever look at him, his shoulders are like ginormous. They're like boulders. And also his name's Master Teague. It's just a sweet name. But I think I forget who he got picked up by. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Was it Chicago?
No, it might have been Chicago or the Giants. One of the two. I can't remember off the top of my head. Tell me who he got picked up because I'm blanking. There's been a lot of moves. I'm trying to remember who went
also
where.
While we're talking about Master Teague, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the reason that he was not picked up is because a lot of his carries were against teams.
That's true. Yeah.
In the second half, like when starters are already beat up, like he never really went against a fresh defense. He was just kind of brought in for mop-up duty. And so maybe he has a lot of stats that you would consider to be garbage time.
That is true.
Master Teague is a Chicago Bear.
Yes, which I think, puts him in Justin Fields. He's played with Justin Fields, and that'd be a good place to see if he can earn a spot. But yeah, Josh, like I think this draft overall was just an interesting one. I mean, I look at our mock drafts. I looked at my mock draft right now, and I'll be honest with you, Josh. I'm actually not that mad about my mock draft. After my previous mock drafts, I'm actually not terribly mad about this one. I got
accurate mock drafts were like 8 or 9 picks correctly, which is a 25%.
Let's see. I got
academics.
I mean, Christian Watson got wrong. I mean, a lot of these I got wrong that just went in the second round. but I was close.
The first pick that I actually got correct with the player going at that pick to that team was Garrett Wilson. I got Chris Olave going 11th right. It just was to the Saints, not to the Commanders. Jordan Davis I had going 13th. It just happened to be to the Eagles, not the Texans. I had, let's see, what was another one here? Treylon Burks. Okay, I thought I had Treylon Burks at 18, but I had him at 19, so that one doesn't count either.
I did have Trevor Penning right. Trevor Penning right. I had Trevor Penning right.
Penning to 16 to Saints, that happened?
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
That's another one that I had too then. So Pickett to the Steelers at 20 was another one that I got right. That's
about it.
Yeah.
Never mind. Josh you made me feel really bad about my draft now. I'm looking at it right now like, wow, I was proud of it. Now I hate it. Dang it. Hey, you know what? I got Sauce right. My man Sauce. Honestly, I'm a Browns fan, but I'm cheering for Sauce Gardner. Just because I feel this connection.
Believe it.
Listen, I feel this connection, Josh.
Josh, top four, I can't believe it.
Josh, I feel this connection between Sauce and I. I feel like because of this podcast, I've gotten closer with Sauce, and we're become friends. I feel like we've got a bond. That also sounds really weird, but it's just that's what this podcast brings out of people, the insanity of my comments. But no, I do think we did get right though. Garrett Wilson, we knew it's going to be top 10. We got that right. I almost got Jamison Williams right. I'm just going to say that. I was 2 picks off. We both got Evan Neal in the top 10, Ike Ekwonu in the top 10, KT, Trayvon, and Aiden Hutchinson. So we got a lot in the top 10 right. We're just not in the right order.
And we had said that before, depending on who goes first.
We said that,
that could totally change the trajectory of the draft.
Yeah, and I think overall, again, I think I just want to finish up by just saying I think the draft overall was a good draft. I think some of our teams did well. Maybe your team did well. Let us know below. How did your team do? How did
one other note about this draft, Ben? This is the first time that I did not watch it on ESPN's broadcast. I actually was listening to some commentary from Menace to Sports.
Okay.
Chris Drew and Zach Smith host that podcast, but then once they shut theirs off after the Ohio State receivers all got taken, I switched over to the guys at Fifth and Goal, and they were a lot of fun to listen to.
Dude,
as well.
Did I not tell you? I told you I was on their. I watched their whole first night stream last draft, and I'll tell you, Aaron does an amazing job over there, and it's actually really Johnny is like a full of tricks nerd when it comes to facts, and I'm gonna have to rewatch that their
The other cool thing about watching those two shows specifically too is the interaction, because it's live and you can comment on YouTube and they'll reply back. Whereas when you're watching the ESPN broadcast, you're just watching a bunch of suits and
Mel Kiper making it wrong like always.
Yeah. Mel Kiper telling us why Drake London at 8 is the right pick. It's okay,
ridiculous.
Well, that isn't right. So
yeah. It is cool though, man. And I was able to, listen to both, both those podcasts I've been able to listen to, and it's cool to see. I always tell people, and I think Josh, you can touch on this. When we do a sports podcast, we know that we're a small fish in a huge ocean of people that do these podcasts. But I think one thing I've noticed is when you're just yourself and you talk, we're Browns fans and we're not ashamed to be yeah, we're going to be biased towards the Browns. It makes it more fun and it makes it more entertaining. Josh, what do you think about that? I mean, we've done a radio show before and it was the same thing. Just be us, and that's what you do.
I think too, as fans, are you going to go to ESPN, who has national coverage and is only seeing stats and not watching all the games, talk about your team and get all these incredibly awful takes like Dwayne Haskins being a runner, Stephen A. Smith? Or are you going to listen to a show with guys that are watching the games every Saturday like you are, that are also very familiar with all the numbers, that may be able to pick up a thing or two out of film because they're actually watching the games, and maybe give you a couple tidbits that you had no idea about as maybe the average fan? I think more people are moving towards those types of shows and realizing that ESPN is, while it is the national, big boys making all the millions, they can't possibly watch everything. And I think it's local coverage is way more not only insightful, but even sometimes more entertaining to listen to.
Yeah, and that's what I love about what we do. I mean, ours is more complicated because I'm 6 hours in the future from you, and I'm overseas and you're there. But that's what makes this fun, though, because I get to experience it after you've watched it. I usually get a message. By the way, people don't realize sometimes like Josh will message things to me, and I'll like wake up to them, and I'll see them and be like, sweet, I don't have to watch that now. I figured out what happened. But
and on the flip side, sometimes I'm going to bed and I'll get something from you.
yeah, that's the thing, because I'll be waking up at I wake up about like 5 a.m, and Josh will be sitting there. I'm sure Josh is sitting there getting ready to go to bed, and like I text him about something that happened, and he's probably like, yeah, I got it, Ben. Like I've been awake for the last 12 hours. But no, we love what we're doing, and we love hearing your guys' comments. I love getting like messages and encouragement. I know like I think both of our parents watch for sure. So that like at least my mom does, which is always like, Mom, I love you, but I hope you understand what we're talking about. Cause I don't know if you do, but no, but it's great, and I hear my dad will talk about the things we talk about, but we really do love what we're doing. And again, if you enjoy the episodes, let us know what you want us to talk about next. I know next week we'll be probably mixing it up with different topics because obviously football draft will be over. There'll be baseball, and we're going to avoid the Reds as long as possible until I decide to do another rant. So that won't be happening anytime soon, but we have soccer coming up. That is some big matches coming up for the World Cup and stuff. So there's a lot of
semifinals, NHL playoffs begin. Yes. Maybe it'll be more of like a broad kind of coverage of the whole sport landscape.
That is probably what's going to happen, because that's us. We never really know, by the way, secret behind the scenes. We don't really know until like the end of the week, because we're like, what should we talk about? But yeah, so anyways, everyone, I hope you guys have an amazing week. If you love watching this on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you can see all the episodes. Maybe you want to see the past ones. Maybe you want to see truly what we thought before the draft, and then what we now think after the draft. Then you can go ahead and do that on YouTube. If you love this on Spotify, Apple Podcast, I'm gonna just pause real quick. Apple Podcast, you're a pain. I'm just gonna say that real quick. I have an Apple phone. I watch everything, but Apple Podcast, to get stuff on Apple Podcasts is ridiculously annoying. So hopefully all the weird things that people were having issues with will be fixed. But wherever you find us listening to a podcast stream, then please go ahead and favorite it, like it, and share it with your friends and family. If you have a sports coworker at work that you guys want to listen to at your lunch break, we'd love to have that too as well. But again, Josh and I will be here next week. Hope you'll join us. Until then, we'll see ya.